Welcome to the second edition of Introduction to Agricultural Emergency Management, produced by the National Agricultural Biosecurity Center at Kansas State University. This section will provide an overview of the agriculture industry in the United States, as well as a deeper look into the beef, dairy, and swine industries. Unless otherwise noted, statistics are from the U.S. Department of Agriculture. The video links provided in this training are for educational purposes only. Their inclusion does not imply endorsement or support of any of the companies represented. First, let's start by taking a general overview of the ag industry. The video on the following slide was produced by the North Carolina Animal Agriculture Coalition. While the video is specific to North Carolina, it serves as an example of how agriculture overall has progressed in modern times. Keep in mind that agriculture may look quite differently from state to state.
In the 1950s, a farmer produced enough food to feed 30 people. Today, advances in technology have increased efficiency, and one farmer produces enough food to feed 155 people.
Our farm over the last several decades has changed. It's not like it was when grandfather was here and my father was here. It has changed. We've had to change to stay and survive on the farm, to make it be successful. But the true value has not changed. We're dedicated to the animals, we're dedicated to the environment and making it work because we make our living from this farm. We want to keep it in really good shape for the next generation.
Many North Carolina livestock farms look different than they did a generation ago. Changes in the past few decades have focused on improvements in farm animal care. Today, farm animals are safer, healthier, and enjoy a better quality of life than ever before. Today's feeds are formulated to meet animals' special dietary needs. Our state's grain farmers support livestock farmers by providing feed products such as corn and soybeans. There are many benefits for housing our flocks and herds in the barns we do today. They provide shelter and safety from the elements and predators. Animals are protected from pests and diseases they might encounter outdoors. They have adequate space for their needs. And farmers can easily identify and provide medical care if needed.
For someone who's never been on an up-to-date pig farm, if they walk inside the facility, I think the first thing you always hear is how clean it is. The second thing you'll find is the living environment. It's controlled. There's just the right amount of ventilation. There's just the right amount of heat in the winter, coolness in the summer. There's all the food and all the water they can drink. So for the pigs, it's an ideal situation.
Farmers in North Carolina provide the meat, milk, and eggs that we all eat every day. And they also provide significant contributions to our state's economy.
Agriculture is a major economic engine in the state of North Carolina. In fact, almost $10 billion goes into our economy from the sale of crops and livestock. Also, nearly 700,000 jobs in this state are farm-related. Agriculture and family farming has been important to the state of North Carolina and continues to be.
A lot of people mistakenly assume that only corporations own modern farms. You may be surprised to know that more than 90% of today's North Carolina farms are family-owned and operated.
The thing I'm most proud of, I would have to say, is it's our family farm. My parents and grandparents that were here before us leaves a legacy for me and pressure on me to do what I feel like they would have us to do.
Agriculture, food, and related industries collectively rank in the top 10 of U.S. industries, contributing $992 billion, or 5.5%, to U.S. gross domestic product in 2015. Of this, America's farms contributed $136.7 billion, about 1% of the GDP. In the same year, direct on-farm employment accounted for 2.6 million, or 1.4% of U.S. jobs. The value of animal agriculture is distributed widely throughout the United States, with different regions excelling in certain areas due to the climate, proximity to feed and additional resources, available land, and other factors. Throughout the presentation, information for each of the major livestock species will be presented separately, but this map provides a quick summary of the overall value of livestock, poultry, and their products sold at the time of the last U.S. Census of Agriculture in 2012. Each blue dot in the chart represents $20 million in value. Among the animal agriculture sectors, the cattle industry had the greatest value in 2015 at $59.9 billion. It is followed by poultry with production valued at around $48 billion, milk production at $35.9 billion, and hogs and pigs at $19.3 billion. In 2016, the U.S. exported $135.5 billion in agricultural products, which accounted for approximately 25% of the value of U.S. farm products that year. Beef, pork, and chicken each rank in the top 12 of all agriculture exports, with their respective values noted in the table on this slide. As you can see, export markets provide a substantial and irreplaceable source of income for U.S. animal agriculture. It is imperative to understand this, as a foreign animal disease or highly contagious disease, FAD, HCD outbreak will likely result in the closure of these markets, potentially for many years to come. This, on top of the direct losses to producers, will devastate the economies of the livestock and dependent industries. According to the 2012 Census of Agriculture, nearly half of the 2.1 million farms in the U.S. had cattle and calves. Of these, just over 64,000 operations were dairies. Additionally, there were 128,000 operations with goats, 88,000 operations with sheep, 63,000 operations with hogs and pigs, and 5,000 operations with captive cervids, which are deer and elk. Among poultry farms, there were 198,000 layer operations, 42,000 broiler farms, and 20,000 turkey farms. We are now going to discuss each of the major livestock industries in the U.S. in more detail, beginning with beef cattle. This slide provides several basic definitions that are fundamental to understanding the beef industry. Please take a moment to familiarize yourself with them. The United States is the world's largest producer of beef, most of which is high-quality grain-finished beef. Within the United States, cattle production accounted for $63.9 billion in cash receipts in 2016, nearly 40% of the total from animals and products, and 18% of all agricultural commodities for that year. By comparison, corn was the second largest cash receipt in 2016 at $46 billion. As of January 1, 2017, there were just over 93.5 million cattle and calves in the U.S., the geographic distribution of which is depicted on the next slide. This map portrays the distribution of beef cattle and calves in the U.S. at the time of the last Census of Agriculture in 2012. Each blue dot represents 10,000 cattle and calves. As you can see, production is concentrated in the Midwest, with Texas, Nebraska, Kansas, California, and Oklahoma leading the nation in number of cattle and calves. The U.S. beef industry is largely composed of the cow-calf and feedlot sectors, though the stocker sector plays a prominent role in certain regions as well. Of the agricultural industries in the United States, the beef industry remains the least vertically integrated. As a result, it is also the most fragmented of the food animal industries in the U.S. Production is split into several different stages that almost always involve a change in geographic location and/or ownership. The graphic on this slide depicts the flow of animals from farm to harvest. Production begins at the cow-calf producer, who may or may not receive breeding animals or genetics from a seed stock producer. From there, calves may go to a stocker or backgrounding operation, or they may be sent directly to a feedlot to be finished for slaughter. The next series of slides will cover each of these phases in more detail. Cow-calf operations are composed of cows, replacement heifers, and often bulls. Generally, bull calves are castrated at a young age and sold as steers to the stocker or feedlot sector to feed out for slaughter. Most heifer calves are sold in the same manner, but some may be kept back as replacement heifers to enter the breeding herd. Calves are generally sold at weaning, which occurs around 205 days of age, or are retained as stockers. The average herd size in the U.S. is only 40 cows. Operations with 100 or more cows compose just 9% of all beef operations, but account for 51% of the beef cow inventory. Operations with 40 or fewer head are largely part of more diverse operations or are a hobby farm that supplements off-farm employment. Cow-calf operations are located throughout the United States, often utilizing land that is poor or unsuitable for crop production. They are typically range or grassland pastures where the cows can forage grass to maintain themselves and raise a calf with little, if any, grain input. In some parts of the country, cows are turned out on wheat or corn stalks for part of the winter to glean more use out of these crops. Seed stock operations are specialized cow-calf producers that raise purebred or registered cattle and provide the genetic base for the rest of the beef cattle industry. Seed stock are marketed as bulls and replacement females to other seed stock or cow-calf producers. Their goal is to continually advance carcass traits, feed efficiency, maternal qualities, and much more through genetic improvement. The following video was produced by a large seed stock operation in the western U.S. and describes their goals in providing high-quality cattle for their customers.
Welcome to Sitz Angus, celebrating 86 years in the Angus business. From the beginning, we've operated our ranch like a commercial operation. No pampering, no excuses, and no second chances. We run in big country, in big pastures, in identical conditions to those of many of our commercial customers. Our emphasis has always been on the mother cow, and our program has long been known for production of top-flight females with femininity, longevity, and structural soundness. The end result of this focus is bulls that are balanced, that excel in a multitude of traits. We strive to produce bulls that have good structure, are long-bodied, deep and thick, and have sound feet and legs that can be problem-free. Each year, we offer large volumes of bulls and females that are half and quarter sibs to assist our customers in the development of a more consistent breeding program. We also make extensive use of cutting-edge technology and genetics in our program. This year, nearly 100 head of Sitz bulls were evaluated by the Igenity Profile for Angus for feed efficiency, longevity, and marbling. Along with this, we also pap test all of the bulls for high-altitude disease. We offer the most complete set of data and information available for you to make the best selection decision possible. Most importantly, when you buy cattle from Sitz Angus Ranch, you buy from a program of integrity and longevity. All of our cattle sell with the Sitz Guarantee. We're a family committed to the cattle business and to helping our customers be successful.
Filling the gap between cow-calf producers and feedlots, stocker or backgrounder operations utilize rangeland or other roughage sources to put a cheap source of gain on freshly weaned calves. Stalker cattle are often sold to feedlots at the end of summer or early fall once the forage quality begins to decline. Some cattle are also backgrounded during this phase, which refers to providing a well-documented vaccination protocol and training them to feed bunks and water tanks like they will use in a feedlot setting. This phase of the production chain is quite fluid and difficult to grasp, as only 17% of stocker producers are exclusively involved in this segment of the industry. Cow-calf producers who also run stocker cattle account for the majority of stocker operators. The video on the following slide provides some additional insight into the scope of a backgrounding operation in eastern Tennessee.
The Fugits run what's called a backgrounding operation for so-called stocker cattle.
A stocker animal is one that has just left its mother, no matter what size, really. We try to put on between 200 and 300 pounds so that we can market cattle that weigh between 8 1/4 and 9 1/4.
Stocker cattle are generally thought of as young calves developed on a forage-based diet until they reach a desired weight. Then typically they're sent to a feedlot or used as replacement cattle in herds. These calves just arrived from a stockyard in Knoxville. The Fugits vaccinate the animals and then get them eating a combination of forage and feed.
We're really better off just exposing them to what they're going to be eating for the whole duration that they're here. I may make some adjustments to the protein level, but not to the ingredients.
The feedlot industry is largely concentrated in the central U.S., with 5 states, Nebraska, Texas, Kansas, Iowa, and Colorado, accounting for 76% of cattle sold for slaughter and 71% of inventory. The industry continues to shift toward a small number of very large feedlots, also known as feed yards, which are increasingly vertically integrated with the cow-calf and slaughter sectors. Cattle are finished on a high grain and protein diet in a feedlot for around 140 days, or until they reach an average live weight of just over 1,350 pounds. The next video provides an overview of how the feedlot sector fits into the overall beef industry.
I believe that the role of the beef feedlot is to basically put on finish on those cattle and grow them to greater weights to get them ready for market. And generally speaking, that involves bringing cattle in that have been accustomed to a forage-based diet, maybe just weaned or coming off of the cow, and gradually adapt them over to a high-grain diet to make them more efficient and to gain more weight and to gain more rapidly. And the role of that feed yard then is to produce a consistent, safe, well-marbled, so therefore I would call a high-quality beef product for the consumer.
Now that you have learned about the movement of beef cattle through the production chain, please review this flow diagram before moving on. To conclude our section on the beef cattle industry, we will now discuss several aspects of the industry that present unique challenges to FAD HCD planning. Perhaps the most significant challenge for the beef industry is the poor traceability of animals. As mentioned at the beginning of this section, the beef industry is the most fragmented of the major livestock sectors, with multiple potential points of sale throughout the life of an individual animal. Often a cow-calf or stocker producer sends cattle to an auction market with little to no accompanying paperwork and a lack of individual identification. The animals are marked with back tags as they move through the market, but these are a transient means of identification that are notorious for staying on poorly. Animals at these markets have nose-to-nose contact with many other animals, easily permitting the spread of a pathogen. They are sold individually or in small lots and then often commingled by a producer or order buyer, someone who purchases and then resells animals. Records from these transactions are historically on paper and would be cumbersome and slow to sort through in the face of a disease outbreak. Augmenting the poor traceability is the fact that there are approximately 400,000 cattle on the road every day in the United States. That is a lot of movement to try to capture if performing a traceback. 125,000 of these animals are finished cattle heading to slaughter. The remaining 3/4 are moving between pastures or farm locations, headed to auction markets, traveling to exhibitions, and more. Few of these scenarios require them to have health papers, thereby exacerbating the lack of records and prompt traceability. High vehicle and personal traffic each day on and off feedlots especially presents significant biosecurity concerns in the face of a disease outbreak, particularly for operations that do not maintain any kind of a visitor log. The spectrum of people and vehicles traveling through the farm each day is incredible, from the employees and nutritionists to salespeople and cattle buyers. Finally, beef producers have typically been the most reluctant toward any form of government oversight or mandatory animal identification or disease traceability programs. This trait naturally further complicates the ability to voluntarily advance FAD, HCD planning efforts. We will now advance our discussion to the dairy cattle industry and milk production. This slide provides several basic definitions that are fundamental to understanding the dairy industry. Please take a moment to familiarize yourself with them. In 2016, milk accounted for $34.5 billion in cash receipts, 21% of animals and product sales, and 9% of the total U.S. agriculture sales. There are currently around 9.3 million dairy cows throughout the U.S. The industry has faced a consistent decline in the number of operations, which has been met with a corresponding rise in the number of cows per operation, leading to a fairly stable inventory in recent years. The major dairy production states are located in the southwest and northern U.S., with 1/3 of milk sales coming from California and Wisconsin. This map represents the distribution of milk cows across the U.S. Each blue dot represents 2,000 cows. This graphic illustrates the flow of the various production stages of a female dairy animal, beginning as a newborn calf, then growing to be a heifer, then a springer, or heifer toward the end of her first gestation, then lactating cow in the milk herd, then a dry cow that produces a calf and herself moves back into the milk herd as a lactating cow. It is more challenging to segregate the dairy industry into different stages of production than the beef cattle industry, because each stage of production occurs on a single site for 97% of operations with 99 or fewer cows, but only for 62% of operations with 500 or more cows. In order to increase efficiency, large operations may own or contract out different sites for each stage of production, such as the calf nursery, ranch, or heifer grower as depicted here. Raising heifer calves off-site is 3 times more common in the western U.S. as in the east. When raised off-site, only 11.7% of operations retain ownership. In most cases, the dairy sells the heifers to a heifer grower, then buys them back as springers. Because the industry is moving toward a smaller number of larger operations, the various stages a female dairy animal may enter will be discussed independently in the following slides. It is important to remember, however, that the entire lifetime of a dairy cow may occur on the dairy alone. Cattle on a calf nursery or ranch are composed of heifer and or bull dairy calves that have not been weaned from milk. These calves arrive at the facility as early as 1 day of age and are generally fed milk and grain concentrate until they are weaned at approximately 8 weeks of age. Calf nurseries or ranches may range in size from 20 to 30 calves on milk to greater than 20,000 calves on milk. The calves are often housed in individual hutches or pens until they are weaned, at which point they are relocated to pens containing other calves of similar ages. At this time, they are often started on a roughage-containing diet. Once the calves have been on this diet for multiple weeks, the bull calves may be transported to a feedlot to be grown and finished out for slaughter. Meanwhile, the heifers may be transported to a heifer grower to finish growing and be bred. Heifers often arrive at the heifer grower around 5 to 6 months of age. Here they are fed a high roughage ration and are commonly housed in pens of 50 to 100 head. Whether the group pens are located on dry lots or within barns varies greatly by region of the country and climate. Heifers are often bred at 12 to 15 months of age and remain at the heifer grower until 1 to 2 months prior to calving, at which point they return to the dairy as a springer to calve and enter the lactating herd. The video in the following slide features Circle Bar Heifer Ranch, a heifer grower located in southwest Kansas. The ranch cares for heifers from 5 months of age to 230 days gestation. At that time, the heifers return to the dairies they came from in Wisconsin or other northern states. The video clip describes a bit of the environment the heifers experience while away from the dairy.
We literally raise the heifers the way that they need to be raised to achieve their genetic potentials. The way we feed them and the way we handle them and the way we move them has a lot to do with how much milk they produce.
Through its association with Circle Bar Heifer Ranch, Cattle Empire is able to offer the finest and most modern heifer raising facility in the country, preparing your heifers for long, productive lactations.
We put an expansion in 2005, and we listened to the dairymen and what they wanted, and they wanted more of a dairy atmosphere. And what we did was we put push-up lanes and feed lanes, just like a dairy would have, where the cattle get fed on the ground in front and all go through stanchions to eat. What that allows us to do is to vaccinate and to artificially inseminate and to palpate and to do all other functions that the normal dairy would do right here at the heifer ranch. And so that they're not scared of the stanchions or the noise that the tractors make when they get transitioned to the dairy.
The thing we like about our ration is it's nice, big, bulky ration. A lot of haylage, straw, wheat silage, and it's a nice big ration. They're eating 60 to 70 pounds at 220 days pregnant, and that's a lot of feed for these cattle to eat, and that's what they're going to be doing when they go back to the dairy.
Once a heifer calves, she enters the milking herd where she will be milked 2 to 3 times and produce an average of 65 pounds or 7.5 gallons of milk a day. The average productive lifetime of a dairy cow in the U.S. is 2.4 lactations. Tie stall or stanchion is the most common housing type for lactating cows, though freestall barns are used by the majority of large operations. While over half of operations provide pasture access for lactating cows, this percentage decreases as herd size increases. The following video provides an example of how a modern large dairy operates. It describes the structure and function of Fair Oaks Farms, a set of 10 dairies located in the eastern United States.
In America's Corn Belt, 70 miles southeast of Chicago and in the heart of the Midwest, lies Fair Oaks Farms, comprising of over 30,000 acres, the majority of which is contiguous. Fair Oaks Farms is one of the world's most efficient and progressive large dairies. Established in 1999, Fair Oaks Farms consists of 10 integrated, self-sufficient dairy units, milking a total of 30,000 cows. The majority of the property straddles U.S. Interstate 65, that is a major thoroughfare from Chicago to the Gulf of Mexico. Our cows live in covered, open-air, freestall barns, each spanning 1,312 feet in length. The sand bedding in each barn allows the cow a comfortable, inorganic bedding that is ideal for her well-being and milk production. During inclement weather, plastic walls are lowered to protect the cows from cold and precipitation. During the heat of the summer, they are kept cool with soaking nozzles that thoroughly wet their backs and sides. The evaporative effect of the fans over the feed bunkers and their beds allows them to keep cool and comfortable. Cows are never more than 50 feet from water or food, and a scientifically balanced diet of total mixed ration is available to them 24 hours per day. They are milked 3 times per day on a 72-cow rotary platform. The quiet, comfort, and ease of milking for both the cow and technician are an essential component in our farm's superior quality milk. Thorough and motivational training of our employees ensures for a quality of milk that far exceeds any national standards. Bacteria and somatic cell counts are within the lowest 5% of the nation. The fact that our milk is chilled from a cow's body temperature of 102 degrees Fahrenheit to 35 degrees Fahrenheit within 3 minutes is significant in preserving the quality that we consistently deliver day after day. Because we are volume driven, Fair Oaks Farms milk can go from milking to store shelf in 18 hours. 5 6,000 gallon tankers leave each dairy unit daily to supply over 251,000 gallons of milk to consumers in the Midwest. Funding each dairy unit is enough land and resources to feed its own cows and manage its own waste. Believing in the 1 cow per acre management rule, 70% of the feed used for livestock is obtained from our farming operations. Corn and alfalfa are the main crops grown on the farm. During the harvesting of corn, the entire plant is chopped into 1-inch long pieces, thereby taking advantage not only of the corn kernel's nutritive value, but also of the fiber value of the rest of the plant. The chopped corn is piled and packed and then ensiled by covering it with large plastic tarps. An anaerobic reaction then occurs, which preserves the feed for years to come. Even during times of drought, our farms carry enough preserved feed to carry us through to the next growing season. Manure management, once a liability to the farm, has now become an asset with the use of methane-producing digesters. 3 times per day, the alleyways of the cows' living quarters are vacuumed. The waste is then taken to the digester's pit, where the sand is separated out to be recycled as bedding. The remaining waste then passes into large holding tanks, where anaerobic bacteria are introduced. As the bacteria consume the solids in the waste, it creates the byproduct of methane. That methane is then captured and fed into methane-powered electrical generators. The electricity created from these generators is used to run the dairy farms. The excess electricity is sold back to the grid. Each 3,000 cow dairy's digester creates enough electricity to power 750 homes every day. The remaining soil-like solids that emerge from the digester are used as a natural fertilizer that is applied back to our farmland, thereby increasing the productivity and value of the farm.
Most dairies will also house dry cows. Dairy cows are typically bred 60 to 120 days after they calve. Approximately 60 days prior to having their next calf, the producer will discontinue milking them and they will be dried off. During this dry period, cows are given an opportunity to rest to allow the mammary tissue to prepare for another production cycle after she calves. They are frequently placed on pasture and moved to a close-up pen immediately before calving and re-entering the milking herd. It is important to remember that in addition to the milking herd, many dairies will also house calves and heifers that are managed in an equivalent way to how they would be in a calf nursery, ranch, and heifer grower facility. Bull calves are handled in a highly variable manner. Some calves may leave the dairy as early as 1 day of age and go to a calf ranch, whereas others may be raised on the dairy until weaning or even slaughter. Ultimately, nearly 2/3 of all operations sell their bull or steer calves through an auction. Hopefully, you now have a better understanding of the modern dairy industry and how animals advance through each of the production stages. Take a moment to review the flow of dairy production before moving on to our final slides about the dairy industry. We will now discuss several aspects of the industry that present unique challenges to FAD/HCD planning. The most unique challenge to dairies is not the cattle themselves, but rather the ability to continue moving milk in the face of an outbreak. Many dairies do not have storage capacity to hold milk for more than 2 days due to the continuous production of milk. Consequently, even a 1 to 2 day stop movement order would likely force most operations to begin dumping their milk, presenting substantial economic loss to the producer, imposing a significant hazard to the environment. That being said, another significant challenge under movement restrictions is where to go with all the calves being born each day on the dairy. For operations where animals never leave the dairy, this is not an immediate concern. But for larger operations that depend on the daily transport of calves away from the farm, a stop movement order would quickly pose health and welfare concerns as producers try to accommodate the surplus animals on the farm. As with the feedlot industry, high vehicle and personal traffic on and off the farm every day presents significant biosecurity concerns in the face of a disease outbreak, particularly for operations that do not maintain any kind of a visitor log. Large dairies produce enough milk for 1 or more trucks to transport it solely from their operation each day, but smaller operations rely on a truck driving a route from farm to farm to regularly pick up their milk. The additional spectrum of people and vehicles traveling through the farm each day is incredible, from the employees and nutritionists to salespeople and the Pepsi man. The following diagram depicts the complicated flow of people, animals, and products through the dairy. While similar to the previous diagram of the flow of animals through the dairy production chain, this chart expands on these concepts by also illustrating the intricate flow of people and products to and from a dairy operation, many on a daily basis. Please take a moment to review this complexity before moving on. In summary, this picture reiterates the most important point regarding the dairy industry and FAD/HCD planning, which is that the milk truck is and must always be on the go. Any disruption to this normal movement will quickly create significant repercussions on the economy, environment, and animal welfare. We are now going to take a more in-depth tour of the swine industry in the U.S. The next 2 slides provide several basic definitions that are fundamental to understanding the swine industry. Please take a moment to familiarize yourself with them. In 2016, the U.S. swine industry produced $18.9 billion in cash receipts, just under 12% of the total from animals and products, and 5.4% of all ag commodities. According to the 2012 Census of Agriculture, there were just over 66 million hogs and pigs in the U.S. The dynamics of the swine industry have changed fairly dramatically over the last 20 to 25 years as it becomes increasingly vertically integrated. Prior to the mid-90s, most of the annual pig crop was produced on operations with fewer than 5,000 hogs and pigs. Industry consolidation and the loss of many small operations have changed that picture so that by 2014, 93% of the annual pig crop was produced on operations with at least 5,000 head, while nearly 75% of operations had fewer than 100 head in 2012. These operations only accounted for 0.8% of the nation's inventory. Historically, hog production has been concentrated largely in the upper Midwest. Iowa has led the nation in hog production for many years, and in 2015 had 30.5% of the U.S. inventory of all hogs and pigs. Over the last 2 decades, North Carolina has increased its production and is now the nation's second largest hog-producing state with 12.9% of inventory. Production has also recently increased in the Oklahoma-Texas Panhandle and in Utah. As with the beef and dairy sectors of the livestock industry, the swine industry also consists of multiple stages of production. However, the swine industry is more similar to the beef industry in that often the different stages of production are housed at different locations. For example, more than 75% of production sites do not house any breeding animals. The following slides will walk through each of the different phases of production. The primary focus of the sow unit is to produce healthy baby pigs that will flow into the other stages of production. The National Pork Board describes this level of the production system as follows. A sow will farrow 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days after she is bred. These baby pigs will weigh about 2 to 3 pounds at birth and reach a weight of 13 to 15 pounds by the time they are weaned, around 21 days of age. After the pigs are weaned, the sow will return to the breeding barn or room. Approximately 1 week later, she will come into heat and be bred again. Sows and gilts are mated almost exclusively via artificial insemination, with less than 3% of either being serviced by a boar. Once the sows are confirmed pregnant, they will be moved to the gestating room or barn, where they will remain until within a day or two of farrowing. At that time, they will move to the farrowing room where they will give birth to more baby pigs. Gilts that enter the sow unit to replace sows at the end of their productive life usually come from a parent farm. The sole purpose of the parent farm is to produce disease-free gilts for a sow farm. When these replacement gilts are brought onto a sow farm, they are often acclimated to the farm's microbiological environment by being fed feces, mummies, placentas, or stillborn pigs, by being exposed to cull females or sick pigs, and or by receiving vaccinations. The gilts will be bred when they reach 170 to 220 days of age. Once the pigs are weaned, they are transported to either a nursery or a wean-to-finish barn where they will be commingled with pigs from other litters. Nurseries have specialized temperature controls and ventilation to support the newly weaned pigs. The piglets will remain at the nursery until they reach 50 to 60 pounds. Most nurseries are all-in, all-out facilities, meaning that the entire group of pigs comes into and leaves the facility together, at which point the facility can be cleaned and disinfected. These groups are closely matched by age, weight, production stage, and condition, and will move together from one facility to the next until being harvested. Conversely, in a continuous flow system, pigs move as individuals, not as closely matched age groups. Consequently, a facility is never totally emptied because animals are always moving through it. If the pigs are not already in a wean-to-finish barn, they will be transported to a finishing barn when they are 9 to 11 weeks of age to accommodate their continued growth. They will remain in this barn until they reach approximately 6 months of age and 280 pounds. As with nurseries, grower and finisher facilities are usually all-in, all-out facilities. As with dairy cattle, most pigs are sent to different, more specialized facilities throughout their lifetime, as described in the previous 2 slides. In farrow-to-finish operations, however, pigs remain on the same farm where they are born and until they are ready for harvest. Because sows are bred almost exclusively via artificial insemination, boars are housed at independent locations called boar studs. These are farms where the boars are trained to mount dummies so their semen can be collected, processed, and sent to sow farms. They are high biosecurity facilities that undergo rigorous disease testing to ensure that the boars and semen remain disease-free. Now that we have discussed each stage of swine production, please take a moment to solidify these concepts before moving on. To conclude our section on the swine industry, we will now discuss several aspects of the industry that present unique challenges to FAD HCD planning, as well as several strengths of the industry in this regard. Just as dairies rely on the regular transport of milk, calves, and cattle away from the farm, swine operations are even more dependent on the regular shipment of pigs and hogs onto the next phase of production. While the specialization of buildings and producers to various production stages enhances efficiency, it also quickly poses substantial welfare concerns when the consistent flow is disrupted. Each facility is only designed to house a certain number of animals up to a certain weight. Additionally, pigs are often scheduled to arrive on a farm weeks or months ahead of time, frequently before they are even born. Consequently, any disruption to this predetermined flow will quickly create a bottleneck, disturbing the remaining segments of the industry. Dr. Butch Baker with Swine Consulting Services described the imperative production flow in this way. Sows farrow every week, and they, the pigs, move to the nursery every week, and they just have to keep moving. There's no way we can store them. As a result of this constant need for progression between facilities, tens of thousands of hogs are on the road at any time. Dr. Patrick Webb with the National Pork Board estimates there are potentially as many as 750,000 hogs on the road daily when one includes hogs traveling to slaughter. Consequently, this sheer volume and movement is a second vital consideration to FAD HCD planning for the swine industry. Animals could easily pass between states before showing signs of a disease, and even more likely is the continued spread of pathogens via contaminated trucks. This was a known source of spread in the 2013-2014 porcine epidemic diarrhea, or PED, virus outbreak. But the resources needed to adequately sanitize trucks between every load was and still remains a major impediment to controlling the spread of disease. Despite its inherent challenges to FAD HCD planning, the swine industry excels in its preparedness for an FAD HCD outbreak. The vast majority of the industry practices strict biosecurity at the farm level. Biosecurity refers to procedures intended to protect people or animals against disease or harmful biological agents. Part of why the swine industry is more advanced in their biosecurity practices is because of the type of housing used. Most animals are kept inside with tightly controlled ventilation and protection from rodents and wildlife, particularly from wild hogs. The industry also widely practices the all-in, all-out management concept described previously. Mandates employees and visitors to shower in and shower out of facilities, and requires that employees or visitors have a certain amount of downtime between visits to different swine facilities. All of these practices and more contribute to strong biosecurity practices. Another aspect of the swine industry that is helpful for FAD HCD planning is the level of vertical integration that exists. While many small farms do an excellent job of managing their operations, in general, larger, vertically integrated farms are going to have more resources available to allocate toward training employees and developing standard operating procedures, or SOPs. This translates to more documentation of farm visitors, daily management practices, health records, and more, which all facilitate preparation for and management of an FAD HCD outbreak. This concludes Section 2 of the Introduction to Agricultural Emergency Management Training. We thank you for your interest in this course. Please continue to Section 3 for information on the remaining major livestock industries in the United States.